Hi kids. What we're going to do today is we are going to take notes on topic 5, lesson 1, estimating quotients and two-digit divisors. And what we'll do is we'll start with some warm-up notes. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video right now and take out your math book and your math notebook. When you're ready, start the video back up. All right, here we go. Let's start off with a few division estimation tips. Okay, let's just start off with a few tips here. Okay, tip number 1 is this. Remember the parts of a division problem. It'll be very helpful if you know what the parts of a division problem are, because that's how your teacher will discuss the process with you. She or he will refer to the quotient, the dividend, the divisor, remainder, that sort of thing. Okay? The other tip is this. Look at your leading digits for compatible amounts. So what you want to do is always go to the leading digits to decide how you're going to create compatible numbers for rounding. Tip number 3. Always think in multiples of 10. In other words, end them in zeros. Okay? So far you want to remember the parts of a division problem, think in terms of those parts, look for leading digits to create your compatible amounts, think of rounding to the nearest 10 or in multiples of 10, and then count to find a starting point for your quotient. So this is kind of a really important one. Knowing where you're going to start your quotient is a huge point for estimating when you're talking about division. So, in practical terms, what kind of takeaways can we get from these tips? Okay, well, let's look at, first of all, the parts of the division problem. If we have a division problem such as 3,704 divided by 42, we could see it like that, or we could see it in that more traditional working algorithm. Okay, either way, we want to know that the number we are dividing is the dividend. In other words, 3,704 is our dividend. We'd also want to recall that the divisor is the number that we're using to divide it. Okay, in this case it is 42. So 42 is our divisor in this situation, and 3,704 is our dividend in that situation. The answer we get, whether estimated or exact, is the quotient. Okay, so the answer we get is the quotient. All right, so those are the parts. Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty of the actual division. Now, in this case, we want to estimate an answer for this division problem. Well, what we want to do is kind of a good thing to do is say, well, how many digits do we have in our quotient? Okay, well, if we're going to divide this, okay, we'd think in terms of this algorithm, and we'd say, well, 42, we're not going to divide it into 3. We're not going to divide it into 37. We're going to divide it into 370. So our quotient would be starting above the 0, which means we're going to actually have a 2-digit estimation, or a 2-digit quotient, depending on whether or not you have a remainder or terminating or non-terminating. But anyways, for estimating purposes, we know that we'll have a 2-digit quotient, all right? So then we can begin the process of looking for compatible numbers. Well, in this case, we'd say, okay, we're going to round 42 to 40. Okay, so our leading digit is the 4. Now remember, we're now going to round this to something compatible, and we're going to use this leading digit of 4, which actually is representing the whole amount of 40, and we're going to say to ourselves, well, geez, this leading digit 3, well, 4, we're not going to put 4 into 3 to get our estimate. We're going to look at 37 and get a compatible number from 37, because 4 will go into a number close to 37. Well, in this case, a multiple of 4 that is close to 37 would be 36. So we're going to round 37 down. And actually, we're going to round the whole amount of 3,704 down to 3,600. And that's how we will set up for our estimation. So if we were doing it down here in a more traditional algorithm, we would round 42 to 40. We would round 3,704 to 3,600. We would then be able to say to ourselves, okay, well, 40 is our divisor. So we're not going to start by dividing 3. We're not going to divide 36 by 40. We're going to go to 360 and divide it by 40. Well, now we know that we can use this 4 and this 36 to get our first digit in our quotient. So 4 goes into 36 9 times. That's an estimate about that. Okay, well, in this case, it's pretty accurate. And so we have 40 into 360, okay, but we used the leading digits to help us get there, and then we just annex a 0. So our answer to this would be about 90 times, all right? So that's how we use this information. Now, that may have gone kind of quick, but so what we're going to do is we're going to go over another example here, okay? We're going to hit another example here, okay? Here is our problem. We have 5,513 divided by 79. Put it into a more traditional algorithm, it looks like that. All right? Now, we want to find some leading digits to round to. Well, the first number we're going to start with is the divisor. Obviously, we're going to round that to 80. Okay? So now, we want to come over here and we're going to set it up like this. We have 80, and then we want to round our 5,513 to a number that is easily workable with or compatible with 80. Well, in this case, we want to, well, okay, let's see how many digits we're going to have in our quotient. That'll be important for our final estimate. So we have 79. We're not going to divide 5 by 79. 79 can't go into 55, but 79 can go into 551, so we're going to actually start our quotient there. So it's a 2-digit quotient in this case. And so now we can start looking for compatible numbers. Well, 8 is a number that's going to help us find compatibility. So then we'll look at this 8 and we'll say, okay, well, 8 can't go into 5, but 8 can go into 55. So that will tell us how to round our dividend. Well, the nearest compatible number to 8 that is close to 55 would be the multiple of 56. Okay, because 8 can go into 56 7 times. So now all we have to do is bring down our zeros to create 5,600. And now we can actually come up with our 2-digit quotient by asking ourselves how many times does 8 go into 56? Well, 8 goes into 56 7 times. That's our first digit in our estimated quotient. Fill in with zeros. And so our answer here is approximately 70. So 5,513 divided by 79 is approximately 70. Okay? And then you could do the full division to test your estimate. All right, so that's quite a bit of information, and actually, that's the whole process of estimating in division when you divide by 2 digits. All right, but let's take a look at what the book has to say. All right, estimating quotients, 2-digit divisors. Notice how they use the vocabulary. How can you use compatible numbers to estimate quotients? They give us a situation. Belinda made 1,598 by selling 82 jewelry stands, okay? Each stand cost the same, okay? Each stand costs the same. So she made this much money, and she did it by selling 82 stands. All of them are the same price. About how much did each stand cost? So we want to find out how much each stand cost, okay? And it tells us over here we have $1,598 dollars for 82 stands, selling 82 stands. Well, then the book gives us some more information on page 127. It says the question asks about how much So we know it's an estimate. So an estimate is enough because the question is about how much. Use compatible numbers to estimate 1,598 divided by 82. The book then says, find compatible numbers for 1,598 and 82. Now, we think in our head 16 can be divided evenly by 8. Notice that they have taken the first two digits of 1,598 and turned them from 1 and 5 into 16 and then created those zeros. Then they took the 82 and rounded it to 80. So you can see how they came about getting their compatible numbers. So 1,680 are compatible numbers. Well, then they just simply did the division, and they know that our quotient will have two digits in it because you're actually going to start, if you were to use a more traditional algorithm, okay, set up like that, you'd know that your quotient would start above the second zero there. Okay, so then you would just simply say 8 goes into 16 two times. It's a two-digit quotient, add your 0, and it's 20. So Belinda charged about $20 for each stand. Then, of course, it says check for reasonableness, and then you would just simply multiply 20 times 80, and you'd get approximately 1,600, which puts you in the ballpark of how much she actually made. So you can say that each jewelry stand cost about $20. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do some example problems, all right? And how we're going to do this is by first taking a look at the problem, and then estimating an answer, and then getting the answer, and then showing you how it actually came, how we came up with that answer. Now, something you need to remember. When answering multiple choice questions related to estimation, okay, because when you take the PSSA or other multiple choice tests and they have an estimation question, you're going to get multiple estimates, and you might not estimate or round the same as the mathematicians who wrote the test. So you might, okay, you might have to do some reasonable guess for the best answer. You might have to come up with a reasonable guess based on your estimate and what the mathematicians thought was a good estimate. So that's where it gets tricky, okay? That's why they say sample answers are given. These are going to be answers that mathematicians come up with. Yours might be different, but if it's a multiple choice test like PSSA, you might have to do some wiggling to figure out what the best answer is, okay? And that's really kind of when it gets tricky, all right? So anyways, here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you to try and solve number 1 on your own right now. Pause the video. All right, here we go. We wanted an estimate for number 1, okay? Now, the answer is about 70. If you didn't come up with 70, you're going to want to watch very closely how we did this, okay? Now, what the mathematicians did was they took 2,863 divided by 43, and they came up with these compatible numbers. They rounded this number to 40, and then they took 2,863 and rounded it to 2,800. And then we know that we are going to end up with a two-digit divisor because 40 can't go into 2, can't go into 28, it can go into 280, so our quotient would start up here, so you'd have 2 digits in your quotient, okay? That's how we came up with 70. All right? Let's have you pause the video and try number 2. Okay, here we go. Let's see if you came up with the right answer. Mathematicians, they say the answer is about 300. Okay? Now, we know that it's about 300, and it's a 3-digit quotient because we have 3,270 divided by 77 divided by 12. Well, 12 can't go into 3, but it can go into 2, which means our quotient will start there and we'll have 3 digits in it. Okay? Here's how the mathematicians came up with this. Okay? They took 3,277 divided by 12, and they rounded that down to 10. Well, a compatible number for that would be a multiple of 10. Easy enough to do. Now, you could do 3,000. It's going to change your estimate quite a bit. So what they're going to do is round it to 3,200. And then, of course, they'll ask ourselves, how many times does 10 go into 32? 10 goes into 32, a total of 3 times. Remember, it's a 3-digit quotient, so you annex some zeros, and that's how they came up with it. All right? What we're going to do now is we're going to pause the video, and I'd like you to try number 3. Excuse me. Okay, here we go. Let's see how you did. The answer to number 3 is about 30. Okay, and they did that by rounding in the following way. They took 2,085 divided by 71. They're going to take 71 and round it to 70. And then they're going to round this to the compatible number of 2,100. Okay, so they rounded that. They rounded it to 2,100. They rounded it up, partially because 8 would tell 0 to go up to 1, and because 21 is compatible with 7. And then, of course, it is going to, because we're dividing by 71, 71 can't go into 2, can't go into 20, it goes into 208, so our quotient would start there. So we need a 2-digit quotient, and that's how we came up with 30, because 7 goes into 21 3 times. All right? Okay, why don't you pause the video and try to answer 4, 5, and 6. Okay, start the video, back up when you're ready to go. Okay, kids, here we are. Let's take a look at the answer for number 4. The answer is about 90, and here's how they came up with this. They rewrote it as 5,400. This became 5,400 divided by 60. Okay, 5,400 divided by 60, because this obviously is going to become 60. 54 is close to 55, and that's compatible with 6. So then all you have to do is know that if we're going to divide this, we know that 64 won't go into 5, won't go into 55, it will go into 554, so that means it's a 2-digit quotient, and there's our quotient. We get the 9 by taking 6 into 54. 6 will go into 54 9 times, and then we fill in the remaining 0. All right? Let's take a look at number 5. The answer to number 5 is about 20. And so we have these numbers that we're going to round. We're going to take the 1,218 divided by 58. And we're going to round 58, we're going to round that to 60. So then we're going to say, okay, well, what is compatible with 6 over there? 12 is compatible with 6. So we're just going to keep that at 12, and we're going to make this 1,200. So the 1,200 now, we can begin to get our estimate. And again, we would ask ourselves, well, how many digits will we have in our quotient? Well, 58 won't go into 1, won't go into 12, but it will go into 121, so we're going to have a 2-digit quotient. So we then know that we're going to take 6 into 12 would go 2 times, and then it's a 2-digit quotient, so we have to add a 0 in there for our 2. So that's how we came up with 20 as our estimate. Okay? Number 6, the estimated answer, or estimated quotient, is 80. And this is how they rounded it. They took 3,309 divided by 43. We're going to take 43 and round it to 40. And then we're going to look for a compatible number with 4 over here, where our 2 leading digits that would create a number compatible and divisible by 4 would be the 3 and the 3. So we're going to take that and make that 32, because 32 is a multiple of 4. And we're going to change the 0 and the 9 to zeros. Again, how many digits will we have in our quotient? Well, 43 won't go into 3, won't go into 33. It will go into 303 to start. So that means our quotient will have 2 digits in it. So then we ask ourselves, okay, how many times does 4 go into our 2 leading digits there? And it would be 4 into 32 would go 8 times. We have 2-digit quotient, so we're going to add a 0, and that's how we came up with 80. All right? So anyways, that's how some just basic problems look. Let's try a word problem now, okay? In this word problem, it says a high school volleyball team has made it to the state tournament. There are 1,482 students that want to go, and 34 students can fit on each bus. All right? About how many buses are needed? You got to be careful with these problems because you don't want to leave anybody behind, so you got to estimate fairly close. Why don't you pause the video and see if you can come up with about how many buses they need. All right, let's take a look and see what you came up with. Here's what the mathematicians came up with. Okay, the mathematicians came up with about 50 buses. How did they come up with 50 buses? Well, here's what we have. We have 1,482 students, okay, and 34 students can fit into each bus. So we're going to divide those students into groups of 34, okay? Well, let's create some compatible numbers and figure out what those compatible numbers will be based on leading digit strategies. We're going to take that and we're going to round it to 30. Okay? So now we're going to ask ourselves, well, okay, how many digits will there be in this quotient? Well, when we look at it, 34 won't go into 1. It won't go into 14. We'll divide it into 148 to begin our quotient. So we're going to have 2 digits in our quotient when we get our estimate. All right? So what do we want to round it to? Well, in this case, we're going to ask ourselves, what number is compatible with 3 in those first 2 leading digits? Well, what we'd want to do is simply take that and we'd say to ourselves, well, we could round it down to 12, or we could go up to 15, which is closer. So that would give us a more accurate estimation, which is important because we're talking about people getting on a bus. All right, so this is what we have. We have 1,500 divided by 30. We're going to take the leading digit of 3 and ask ourselves, how many times does 3 go into 15? It goes into 15 a total of 5 times. So that's the first digit in our 2-digit quotient. Then all we have to do is fill in our 0, and that's how they came up with about 50 buses. All right? So anyways, there you go. There's some estimation for you. If you have further questions or concerns, you can always go to your parents for help when you're doing your homework. You can stop in and see your teacher at tutorial, or you can stop and see your teacher right now if you start your homework right now. All right? Have a good day.